Welcome to CISO Insider, Nightfall's chat with Chief Information Security Officers. We host CISOs from different industries to discuss their pathways to the role, the challenges they face in their everyday work, and lessons they can share with anyone aspiring to become a CISO. This podcast brings you into the world of cybersecurity and gives you a window into the most brilliant minds in the business. Today on CISO Insider, we're joined by JJ Agha, Chief Information Security Officer at Compass. JJ shares his journey as an information security professional, covering his childhood from how he grew up playing DOS games to eventually starting an entrepreneurial business in college. He talks about how these experiences were formative to his curiosity about technology and learning the ropes as an information security engineer. Here's my colleague Michael Osakwe from the Nightfall marketing team to chat with JJ. Please join us in welcoming JJ to CISO Insider.
All right, JJ, thank you for joining us, especially so early in the morning. Jumping right in, one of the first things we wanted to ask is, tell us about your educational background. Were you drawn to tech at an early age, or did you discover tech later in life? How did you get into tech?
So luckily enough, I was kind of exposed to it at an early age. There was always computers around. It started with video games, started with computers, an old IBM where I would just jump in and type at 3 years old just because I thought it was cool. And then it turned into, Windows 3.1 and my dad playing Doom and me trying to figure out how can I play Doom when he's not around, opening up DOS and prompting up the windows so I could play Doom or Treasure Cove. And then, at that age, it's early 90s and I started really getting into video games as anyone would at that time. And then translated into, me getting, a cable modem in my house. And that's really what unlocked it. AOL and getting my first personal computer, that was the start of, at being 10 years old, connected to the internet. It unlocked every single possibility, question, and curiosity that I had. And my brother-in-law was a big influence. He was going to school for CS at the time. And so having that kind of mentor and influence in my life of a college student willing, pretty much he treated me as his brother, to teach me of how to mod computers, how to overclock my processors. Why did I, go out and buy the first CD-ROM to start burning? I was the kid selling burnt CD-ROMs or burnt DVDs at the school because I always had to have a side hustle. And then it turned into, Dreamcasts and bootlegging content that I couldn't afford, as a kid. And so started bootlegging and started pirating as much as possible. Eventually started getting into, I can make a career. And so at 18, I was hired as a consultant, just doing some basic, Adobe Photoshop design work, some light HTML, but mainly it was, just basic computer training or, configuration of setting it up, a office LAN and installing Windows, XP on 20 devices. That's where, I first started getting my first taste of, there's money behind this versus I really enjoy just doing this. And then in school, I didn't go in for CS. I went in for business administration because I was like, I love selling things. I love talking to people, switched to communications. I changed my major about 10 times. And then I did major in computer science for one semester, but then ended up settling on information science because I wanted to graduate on time. That was the only place that I could graduate on time. And that worked out really well because I was able to, throughout the 4 years of school, to constantly touch technology as I worked for the help desk for the university, where I was helping, the CISO there. I was helping remove malware for students' laptops, basic Blackboard support, and basic hardware and computer support.
Awesome. Yeah, that's not an uncommon background, actually. Even Ty was telling us that he grew up with the Commodore 64 going into programming and technology at an early age. Did you find that your interest in security was peaked early too, or did this general tech interest kind of move into security in college? When exactly were you exposed to security as an interest?
So I think security and even the concept of security, I had no purview, right? There's no cybersecurity programs. There's no IT, security training that I was exposed to when I was going to school. I watched Hackers, I watched Matrix, but that was my superficial understanding of what these quote unquote hackers were, right? So my understanding of security was I would say the majority of what the world thought of were these hackers, these Angelina Jolies running around with payphones, right? Um, it was not until I would say my senior year in college where I started working with the CISO of people getting kicked off our network, people, breaking our acceptable use policy and understanding, well, now you got to talk to our CISO. And then once I started working at my first job, um, at Air Force Bergen, I was working with the DEA's public key infrastructure. And so that really got me interested into, whoa, what is public key infrastructure? What is crypto, right? We needed to do this to support ordering of Schedule 2 drugs through our portal. And through that process, really kind of snowballed into I really like security, and then me actively looking for a security job um, after my first job out of school. So my first security job was at Northrop Grumman after that.
Cool. And as you got into security, how did you kind of figure out that you wanted to be a CISO? Like, what was that aha moment, or was there an aha moment where you're like, I want to be a CISO, I want to be in charge of security, like I'm really into it?
Yeah, I think it's been ingrained in me at an early age of being the manager, being a leader, being the captain. I've always played sports. Whether it was online, with video games or playing Rainbow Six with friends for 40 hours straight, SOCOM, Halo, or playing tennis, baseball, football, softball. I always gravitated towards the leadership role. I always gravitated towards the person who wanted to take the accountability, take the responsibility, and say, "Hey, whether we win or lose, it's up to me to help everyone out." And that's always been ingrained in me at an early age. Once I started going into security, um, and I started working at EdgeCast Networks. That's when my mentor at that time, still my mentor, a great guy, he introduced me into, hey, I'm a CISO. What does this mean, right? What did a CISO mean? And he was kind of that player coach, helped me mentor, would pull me in for 2 hours, and he really set the tone of what um, I loved about not just being an engineer, but being that technical CISO that I was really drawn to. So I think it was partly just my upbringing, but then being exposed to the right leadership, the right mentors at the right time in my career path that said this was something I wanted to achieve and grow towards.
That makes sense. Yeah, and as the ingredients sort of came together, how did you identify the resources that would help you kind of smooth your trajectory up the ladder to becoming a security leader?
Yeah, you know, one of the best decisions that I tell everyone that I made was I was born and raised in New York, and I made the decision to take the leap and move to California to work for a startup. And that was kind of the idea of I want to be really uncomfortable. I want to learn from anyone that could help me out to get me towards this path of just constant growth. I wanted to be challenged. I wanted to unpack these multiple puzzles. And so when I moved cross country, I started working at EdgeCast, which would then I got introduced to the CISO, who was my mentor. But that was one of the biggest resources, just picking the right company and the right time. And based off of the right company, the right time, the right mission that they had set, the right technical challenge that they were trying to solve for, I fell into a rabbit hole of, well, okay, network security, what does this mean? Software security, application security. And then I had a great, mentor, his name is Cliff, who also helped me out with just asking questions constantly. And so it was kind of the what everyone says is you want to surround yourself with the five smartest people. I was able and had the luxury and lucky enough to walk into being the person that walked into the room with five smarter people. And so I was constantly exposed to things that I normally wouldn't have and was provided to me to make the decision. And so that constant exposure, that rapid growth, things that you only see and get exposed to at a startup at such a early stage of my career helped me get 10, 20 years of experience in such a short amount of time.
Cool. You kind of touched on this, but what attracts you to an opportunity? What about the company culture, the people, the experience attracts you to your next move?
Yes, I think in general, there's some stability in life. We want stability, right? But from a security professional and just purely technical standpoint, I want something that will challenge me every day. I want to be able to wake up and feel that I'm growing or learning something new. Um, and I think with everything that's happening in the world as well, being aligned to goals outside of just the business goals, but what our society, expectations are, what our new system should look like. That's where I think I'm really leaning heavy towards where it's like, all right, well, we're aligned philosophically. We're also aligned with the technical challenges that you are trying to solve for. And I feel like I would walk in, be able to help, but also be challenged, right? I don't think I would ever want to, at this point in my career, want to walk into a place where it says, I know all the answers, just listen to me. Nor do I think anyone has all the answers. But I do want to be able to walk in and say, I'm thoroughly challenged. You are empowering me to make the right decisions, to drive the business forward. This is kind of a perfect glove, if you will.
That makes sense. And we know that you also, outside of work, do advisory work for Nightfall. What attracts you to do advisory work, and why specifically did you choose Nightfall, for example, as one of the companies you advise?
So Rohan and Isaac reached out to me on a cold LinkedIn message, and I get probably 20 to 50 to 100 a week. Rohan and Isaac just kind of hit the right approach based off of kind of where they came from, right? Rohan and his work with Uber Eats, having that big, large distributed data system in his background, becoming a founding engineer and growing that out. That was something I was like, okay, technically they're onto something. Speaking with Isaac, him coming from the VC world, he was very articulate, knew how to ask the right questions and dig deeper. He wasn't kind of superficially fishing for, hey, I just want I want a challenge and I'm going to go solve for it and I plan to do X. You want something meaningful, something meaty, something that really was a challenge that he could solve for. Secondly, once we started kind of going back and forth, we really figured out kind of what was the challenge that they were looking to solve for. And I loved the idea that they would bring a diverse lens into solving it. They weren't coming in from my CISO lens of, hey, or, VP of security saying, hey, this is how we have to solve for it. They, Rohan and Isaac, they were coming from, well, we build out the pipelines for the data. If we do X, if we do Y, we could actually make it easier downstream, right? So as opposed to fixing it so far downstream of, well, we just need to do asset management, the traditional way of we want to classify. They decide, hey, no, let's go further upstream. Let's get it before it becomes a problem. And so they shifted the paradigm of how to solve data security for programs or for businesses that their diverse background was able to provide to the challenge, and it really kind of hit a home run. Funny enough, additionally, as we started building out this relationship, kind of what sealed the deal was I took my team to meet Rohan and Isaac. This is before I think Watchtower even had a name, or it was Watchtower before Nightfall. But the they came out. I took them out for dinner. and they shared a meal together, right? They weren't the, hey, we're just going to try to spend all your money. They were humble, they were frugal, they had both great experience and backgrounds and big wins early on in their career. They didn't come in saying, you owe me the world. They came in very similar to how I approach it is, I'm going to be observant. I want you to tell me. I'm going to make the best decision based off of the facts that you're giving me, and let's make this a conversation. And like even just that simple of them saying, "No, what, we're going to share a meal." It showed me that they were in it for the right reason. They were willing to take their shirt off their back to hand it to one another. And from a co-founding standpoint, I was like, these guys really are in it to not just help individually themselves, but to help the larger group. And I see that with some of my best friends where we'll come together, and I have the luxury to work with one of my best friends where we will constantly take that approach where I'd take the shirt off my back to help him out, and however we have to do to make the project, initiative, or goal move forward in the right way if it takes some individual sacrifices.
And do you find for your own advisory work, like how does it help you grow as a CISO and as a person?
Well, I think and that's a great question. Being able to do context switching quickly, right? So I have my process where I have to do my day to day, and then I also have the advisory work of, well, what are the challenges that a Rohan or Isaac are having? Maybe it's not a security product decision. Maybe it's about, hey, do I have to have a conversation with the customer? Am I having a conversation with the next VC, another advisor? How can I help shape their path as a company? From being an internal, I am very closely knit, day to day with, what is our business goals, what are business initiatives. And so the context switching is a lot less. So it allows me to be fresh. It allows me to constantly take my learnings that I have day to day from my day job, apply it to the advisorship. And then even from being an advisor, I'm able to take that kind of quick, 2-hour, 3-hour hit that I might have with a company, take that back and say, all right, how they're actually approaching this is actually a better way. Let's figure out how do we need to solve it for it and provide feedback to it. And so it's this constant feedback loop. And you'll probably hear me say it multiple times in this interview of OODA loop, but it really is a gigantic OODA loop within myself of, I'm going to observe, I'm going to act, and then I'm going to make a decision, and I'm going to just constantly follow through that process.
That word you use, OODA loop, what is that? Bro, I had never heard that.
So it stands for observe, orient, decide, act. It came up from in security in general. Security started from its roots are from like the army, from intelligence, right? And so we take a lot of these nomenclature and these acronyms from the military. The OODA loop came from an Air Force pilot, and it was a way to help them make decisions faster, right? To make the best decision with the information that they have. So the idea is that you're going to observe, you're going to orient towards the information that you have, you're going to make the decision, and then you're going to act on that decision, and you're going to constantly do that, right? So it was a way to help, I believe, in dogfights of how to react within a actual dogfight. But that idea of observing and orienting is the same idea of how do I observe and collect information as best as possible? How can I then take enough of that information and provide a solution or a decision point where I have enough understanding of the business trade-off, I have understanding of the technical risk, and then making a decision, the action to drive that decision, right? What the actual lever of pulling the decision point to say, all right, this is the action that we're taking based off of all this information. Then if that action doesn't work out, quickly redo the OODA loop and observe, orient, and redo it again and again.
Thanks for the etymology lesson. Moving on to the general situation in the world, so someone is up and coming and COVID-19, How would you say they should begin their career as a security professional? If you were to put yourself in their shoes, like what do you think you would do to get ahead during the pandemic?
So I think the challenges with COVID now and kind of how the uh, yeah, how you actually start your career, right? If I'm a fresh hire, right, I just graduated in May and I started a new job here. Um, you're now not jumping into a room with 20 people or 10 people, right? You're going to be forced to be a better communicator. You're going to be forced to better provide kind of what is the risk, right? So you're going to learn how to articulate and how to self-learn, right? And so there's people that I've come across where they are not willing to learn. They just want it to be fed to them. They just want secondary exposure, right? I'm sitting here, I hear someone having a conversation, I'm going to turn over, or I'm going to show my screen and say, this is a problem that I have. I think with this post-pandemic world that we're moving towards, the time horizon of this type of learning is going to be shrunk down to months versus what might have taken years. But mainly, I think everyone's going to have to learn how to be a better communicator and how to translate the kind of concerns, the risk in email or in Slack or in Zoom in a way that is clear, that is transparent, that provides enough information that doesn't muddy down what you're trying to get across to the point where the person on the other end could say, understood, you provided me with the corrective, appropriate information. Here's my quick feedback versus it divulging into a 2 hour, 3 hour, wait, that doesn't make sense. And it happens, it still happens. It happens in person, it happens online. But, I think as we mature through this process, it's less of the, I need a dissertation, right? Provide me 5 or 6 bullets that are appropriate, right? Even like Jeff Bezos, his idea of, hey, I don't want a PowerPoint, I want a 3 or 4 page clear understanding of what is the problem and how you're going to solve for it versus these cheap bulleted, when do we want the problem? Now. How do we solve it? Now. I was like, well, great, like it's, you got me excited, but what's the meat of it? And so I do think the part of this process, part of this learning, is that the person is not going to be able to ping someone on Slack and get an immediate answer because you're not sure where they're in the middle of the work, right? You can't look over their shoulder and say, "Oh, they're free, let me ping them." They're going to have to self-learn. They're going to have to, be a Google ninja, right? We all use Google. We all have resources available at our fingertips. We have policies and procedures. We have run books that have been created. Those resources, I think, are going to be more stringent and more useful and require folks to become more accountable to themselves versus accountable to the well, you tell me, right? And I think that lens of switching, that lens of learning will go a long way. And then hopefully it wraps up with the appropriate way on communication. The biggest challenges that I think we face is that it's hard to communicate with clarity what we're trying to solve for, right? What is the trade-offs that we're trying to solve? And it might be as simple as I want to put in a allow list in this particular program. Well, what's the impact if you go that route, right? Or it might be as complex to me sending an email to the COO saying, we can't do this business adventure because of XYZ. And, however I approach, one's a very strategic decision and one is a very operational decision and a risk that I'm taking. But how I actually frame that information and communicate it is pretty much the same way.
And then if you were to, in terms of education, like recommend resources for people up and coming in the pandemic, do you have any, especially for self-learning, if someone has to kind of break into the industry in this environment?
So I pay for Pentesters Academy. We're a diverse group, and so how someone likes to learn might be tangible, right? They want to be hands-on versus I want to read a book and I want to go the certificate route. And so providing a suite of available resources is kind of been the approach. The time that I have now, I like to read, but then make it practical, right? Read a chapter, apply it. How do I actually make this useful, right? What I'm reading in a book, right? Whether if I'm going for a certification or if I'm going for, an exam, when I read in a book and what the exam wants might not actually be applied to the real world because there's variables that are not seen from the instructor, from the exam creator. It's not possible, right? And that goes into the issues with certificates and these people who have 10 acronyms after their name because they have every single certificate after. I have a CISP, but do I feel that it was well worth it? 100%. But back to your question about what's the best way to learn now. There's a lot of these academies online. Pentester Academy, hackthebox.eu is a great CTF challenge. And so it depends because security in general is so diverse. So do you want to become a network security engineer? Do you want to become an enterprise security engineer? How do you get access to a Google or G Suite enterprise account? Well, how do I get access to AWS and not cost an arm and a leg? And so these are I think one of the issues with certificates is that they try to generalize security so much. They try to generalize the problem versus just get a basic understanding of how TCP/IP works. How does the OSI model is, right? The particular protocols that work and how the internet works. Get those basic understandings and then apply what's interesting to you around those frameworks, around those protocols to security, right? You're not going to become a crypto expert and then a network security expert and then a software engineer overnight. But if you pick these particular verticals and say, I'm going to dive into it because this is what's interesting, then match the right learnings to it, you're then able to apply and make it actual practical knowledge versus I have a book knowledge and I have just a basic understanding or I just have book understanding of how, encryption works, right? Well, tell me actually what's the SSL handshake? Why is it important, right? What is elliptical curve defilement? Why is that important? What's forward secrecy? These are the things that even I ask my team of, they'll say, hey, I learned something about encryption. And it's just that snowball effect of if you constantly, provide that, hey, what about this? Resources are Wikipedia, Hack the Box, Pentesters Academy. But once you start getting practical, it's nice to have a conversation with whether you consider it a coach, a mentor, a manager, or even just a senior or lead engineer on the team to say, hey, I've read this. Can I bounce this idea off of you? And that was something that as I went through and got my certificates, early on in my career, I had the soundboard to constantly ask, right? Say, hey, what about this? Okay, great. This is what I read, but how do I actually apply it to the real world?
I think you kind of touched on this, but how do you think practitioners should be making the most of certificates, or should people even be getting certificates anymore? Or is it sort of an antiquated concept?
I mean, I think it's antiquated in the sense where from HR hiring manager, people would just put CIS, right? I need a CIS. I need someone with CISM. It's a lazy way of writing a job description. It's a lazy way of writing what qualifications or what you're actually looking for, right? What makes a system a CIS? Oh, they have the exam. Oh, okay, but they passed the certificate. Well, what actually are you truly looking for? Are you trying to hire someone with analytical experience, with software engineering experience, with experience on cloud computing for AWS, or experience on providing threat reports? Write that out. Be very kind of open-ended because even if you write, hey, I want someone with 10 years of experience, or you see job descriptions, I want 20 years of experience for blockchains. Like, well, blockchain hasn't even existed for 20 years, but good luck. But those are the things where I think it steers away the graduates. It steers away the people that are trying to break into it because they see, okay, if I get a system, if I get in a security plus, I qualify for the job. Well, it's like, no, because you're going to get interviewed for that job. And because of a terrible job description and because of what the hiring manager has asked the recruiter to source, right? Look for anyone with a Security Plus certificate. You're going to be pulled in. You're just going to be studying for the Security Plus, and you only have book knowledge versus practical knowledge of when that interview process comes in. Now, from the graduate side, I can't fault them for wanting to get that, right? Because they are looking for any entry, any way in, right, of getting that security position. And so part of it is I've even asked my team of, all right, I want you to get your Security Plus because it shows that you really are into wanting to learn about security. And these are for folks that were typically network engineers or system engineers that start off. And I was like, hey, get some basic understandings of the different domains and verticals within security. So then when you come over to security, you have a better orient of, I want to go down application security. I want to go down system security. I want to go down enterprise security. And that's a way, getting that Security Plus is a way for them to get that rapid exposure, but they have basic understandings of how the technology works, and then they can apply security to it. That's where I think advice to folks that are getting the certificate is if they start talking about HTTPS, understand what HTTP is, right? Understand how the internet works before you start trying to figure out how security gets applied to it. And so if you have kind of principal understanding and core understanding of the technology, then you're able to dissect it. And so, going back to some of the early questions of kind of like what got me into computers, what got me into technology, the curiosity is key, right? Not taking an answer superficially of what you read in the book, but digging deeper into it. Well, why is that security control actually there? How can I manipulate it? Why does this protocol allow this to happen? Right? If you look at DNS, if you look at HTTP, FTP, why is this actually happening versus, just use FTP, SFTP? Well, yes, technically the answer is right, but you won't be able to tell me why.
So one of the things I noticed that's come up in the interview is like what do you think? What would you say is sort of the correct mix of book knowledge to kind of applied knowledge? Like, when is book knowledge important for a security practitioner, and then when is the hands-on experience most important for a practitioner?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I don't think it's a 50-50 or 60-40 split. I'm going to be, to be transparent, I probably won't have the answer of, hey, this is the actual, the right percentages, because it's going to be dependent on the individual of how they actually want to learn and the type of company and type of role that they're going for, right? There's positions where you're just going to be doing research and you're going to read every single white paper, but that white paper is going to have a lot of practical hands-on experience about, this is what we read, this was the theory, this is our hypothesis, this is how we applied it to the real world. And so that is some practical information that they're getting. But kind of early in my career, it helped me get a foundation. And so I'll reflect on myself on this answer. Reading and getting these kind of distilled books where it wasn't 100 tabs down. It wasn't me, taking 40 hours of my mentor's time. It was me getting distilled information, whether it was a CIS, whether it was Bruce Schneider's crypto book. It was me reading it and then coming back to my one-on-one and asking my mentor, saying, hey, this is what I read. If I applied it here, how does this work out, right? And so taking the maybe 3, 4, or 5 hours of book reading and then applying it to the 2 to 5 minutes that I have to ask that particular question, or the next time this situation arose at work, I was preparing myself, right? And so a lot of it, the reading, getting the book knowledge, and trying to apply it practically is just pure preparation. And then once that moment happens, oh, great, based off what I read, based off of the information that I've asked, this is how I'm actually going to apply it. And then once you're applying it, know that it's okay to not follow the book to the T. Know that it's okay to veer off course, because what that book might be 5 years old, 10 years old, or the business is completely different, right? The business risk, the tolerance to what the leadership wants, to what your boss wants, to what the customers want is completely different. And so what they don't teach you, and I think books now are doing a lot better, like a book about fair methodology that I'm reading, is that they're making you ask, well, what does the business need? What is the actual trade-off of the control that we're saying that you need to apply? 10 years ago, 5 years ago, a lot of these exams are, you have to do it. It's a binary decision, and none of this is binary, right? In computers, yes, right? It's a 1 or 0. You're going to make a decision. But when it comes to the communicating, you have to figure out what are the trade-offs. You have to understand what is kind of the compromise you're willing to take, and provide a few solutions and to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of like tying into that, I listened to one of the episodes of the security vendor podcast, and you were co-hosting, and I remember the segment, "What's worse?" and how your answers differed from Mike's. I was kind of interested in knowing, like, how do you as a CISO, with the wide variance of responses and answers you can give to a problem, how do you deal with that ambiguity, and how do you develop heuristics for assessing a given situation when it could have any multitude of answers?
Yeah, and so one of the things, it goes back to accountability, and so I want to say that's it is a very important characteristic, right? You want to be accountable to the program and the decisions that you make. But I took it upon myself as I was growing out the team of, well, how can the team hold me accountable? How can the company hold me accountable? And so we had our policies and procedures. We went through multiple frameworks and we got certified. But what I didn't have was a program plan, right? What is my succession plan if I get hit by a bus? What is my plan for the team to say, if you have to come and make the same decision that I have, what are the tools that I use? What are the traits, what are the heuristic keys that I use to say, this is how I best make the decision that's going to affect the business, that's going to affect the team, right? And so even as simple as, these are the tools that we want to buy versus these are the tools that we want to build. What are the decisions versus build and buy? What are the decisions versus a global versus a localized team? And so one of those key pieces inside, what I call the program plan, specifically for my team, was I wrote out 4 values. And so the values are clarity, empathy, diversity, and resiliency. And the idea is that, if you apply this to the OODA loop, if you apply this to, the CSF framework and multiple things that live within security, these are kind of the evergreen values of, well, why are we doing what we're doing? How do we approach a situation? How do we make a decision, right? And so kind of walking this through, you'll be presented and uncover multiple ambiguous challenges through the course of a day, a month, a year, within your career, right? Within your tenure at the company. And as a CISO, you kind of need to understand and have empathy towards the strategic business goals and what makes it successful, what makes the business goals and what makes the customer's success, right? What is that? Do you have a true understanding of it? Or are you saying, no, I kind of understand? Or are you empathetic to all the people that are really working towards achieving those goals, right? And that might be empathy towards your software engineer who needs to push a release in the next 2 weeks, your product manager, to your COO, to your GC. Do you have true understanding and empathy, and have you been able to understand what they're trying to work towards, and feel connected to it? And then once you kind of have that, hey, this is what makes the business successful. These are the goals that we're working towards. Be resilient and diverse as you kind of analyze and develop the solutions. Kind of, what are you actually going to put in place that helps empower and make sure that this is successful? But you're coming up with a multitude, a diverse set of, this is the way to do it. There's 1,000 ways to skin the cat. This is no longer a yes or a no answer. This is a yes, but, right? So provide the multiple ways that if you do it this way, this is the business risk of doing it that way. If you do it this way, this is the trade-off of the business risk that you're doing it, right? And so you can provide that level of risk and that level of trade-off without getting so deep into the technical controls where they're getting lost. And then to the clarity point, you're able to communicate it back to, well, this makes sense because you've told me if I do X, this is the risk that I'm going to trade off on. And it's a clear, it's concise, and it's transparent to everyone in the org where, all right, if we're going to implement a allow list for, all of Google extensions, what does that mean? Right? If we're going to enforce multi-factor authentication, what is the actual business trade-off, right? It's great security, but what is the friction that we're adding? And so these are the decisions that, if you apply it to the OODA loop, you're observing, you're orienting, you're deciding, you're making action, but you're taking those 4 core values of, is this clear? Am I providing clarity? Do I have a true understanding and understand what the business needs, what the business goals are, what the initiatives are at a strategic, tactical, or operational level? And then are my solutions, are my projects, are my goals, diverse? Are they resilient in the way we can solve for these challenges? And so, by presenting that in that program plan, it kind of helped steer away this is the ambiguity that I carry, right, of myself of making the decision and provide it to my team so that they know there's no ambiguity when they ask or raise it to me. These are the 4 core values that I'm using to constantly make the best decision for the company.
And what's your proudest moment as a CISO?
So, in my current role of when I got hired at WeWork, I was the first security director, and I was tasked with, well, go build out a team, go build out a program, make us help us grow this business. And so, going from 800 employees to 15,000 employees across the globe, building out the team of 40 plus engineers, managers, that was probably my proudest moments, is that not only did I build out a team, but I was able to build out a functioning program that supported the business to grow the way it needed. And that each one of, whether it's an engineer or a manager on the team, based off of the tools that I provided, based off the program that we built together, I was able to step away and they were able to make any decision that I would in that seat, right? And so going back to that succession planning, if I got hit by a bus, I was able to go and say, all right, what, team, I can't take this meeting, but you can go in and you can make the decision for me. I fully trust you and empower you to make that decision. And so I think as a new father for the past year, and new father for the next 6 weeks of the second one coming in, I'm proud that I have full trust in my team and I empower them to make the decision that's best for the company with full authority, and that I have no quarrels about where they got the information or how they actually made that decision, because of what we built will forever last beyond me, right? That, the tenure that is typically within security of 18 months of leadership, that I've more than doubled and tripled it, and have built something that's going to last longer than me. And so that's where I'm very excited that I get to hang my hat on, for the team. And I've got to see people grow, from being an analyst to an engineer to being a manager in multiple levels, both professionally and personally. And that's been one of the greatest achievements, in my career as a leader.
And then what's the biggest takeaway you've gotten from your career that you wish you knew when you were younger?
So I think it's you don't need to be the smartest person in the room, right? And so you want to have knowledge of it, but it's the being okay with being wrong. It's the proverb that I use a lot, even with my team, of don't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? Are you growing? Are you constantly getting better, right? And so be observant, be decisive, make decisions, right? Don't, we are very much in a now culture, right? If you have the information, did I empower you? Am I making the right decision? If I make the wrong decision, it's completely fine, but know that I made the wrong decision, act upon it quickly, and then iterate on it to become better. If I got everything right every single time, if any of us did, we would think there's nothing wrong that we could do. And so it'd be foolish to think, and I think this goes back into just being young and naive of, you know what, I need to become the smartest person in the room. So anytime someone asks something, I know the answer. Well, no, I want to just be the person that has the 4 values that I've talked about, that truly understands what you're trying to articulate or communicate out, help with that process, and make you better. Because by making anyone better that I surround, in turn, the program gets better, the business gets better. But it's don't let perfect be the enemy of good is what I'll tell my younger self constantly.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering these questions, JJ. It's been a very informative and engaging interview. So thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for listening to CISO Insider, a podcast created and sponsored by Nightfall AI, the industry's first cloud-native data loss prevention solution. If you're enjoying the show, please leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts. The ratings and reviews help more people find us. Follow Nightfall on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Nightfall AI. That's Nightfall AI, and email us at marketing@nightfall.ai with questions, feedback, and suggestions about CISO Insider, including suggestions for CISOs you'd like to hear from. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you again next time.